With the latest headlines for viewers in the UK and around the world. President Trump signs the largest ever US financial stimulus package worth $2 trillion as the country grapples with the coronavirus pandemic. In Italy, more than 900 people have died in the past day, the biggest daily rise so far in the country that's been locked down for almost 2 weeks. Britain's Prime Minister and the Health Secretary, the men in charge of Britain's fight against coronavirus, both test positive for the disease as the UK's death toll climbs again.
I've developed mild symptoms of the coronavirus, that's to say a temperature and a persistent cough, and on the advice of the Chief Medical Officer I've taken a test that has come out positive.
Police in Britain start cracking down on people who are leaving their homes when they shouldn't be. We'll be covering all of the latest developments on coronavirus in Britain and across the globe, where the total number of confirmed cases has now passed 500,000. In the UK, there have been nearly 3,000 new confirmed cases, including the Prime Minister Boris Johnson, bringing the total to 14,500. A further 181 people with the virus have died in the last 24 hours. That means there have now been 759 coronavirus deaths in the UK. Italy has recorded another enormous surge in daily deaths from coronavirus, 919, to take the total number of deaths to 9,134. In the United States, more than 100,000 people now have the virus. That's more than any other country in the world. President Trump has signed into law a $2 trillion emergency spending package to relieve the impact of the coronavirus on the US economy. The BBC's Nick Bryant reports now from New York State, where half of the US cases have been confirmed.
New York, New York, the worst infected city in what's now the worst infected country. There was always the sense that this planetary pandemic would end up ravaging this global hub. And while there's a deceptive calm on its now quiet streets, behind the doors of its inundated hospitals, the crisis is getting worse. Emergency calls have hit their highest levels since the attacks of September the 11th.
Meanwhile, in France, the lockdown has been extended for another 2 weeks until the middle of April, with a warning it could be extended further than that. Almost 2,000 people have died there now, including a 16-year-old girl whose death this week has shaken many people in France. Here in Britain, fines have already been issued by the police to some people who've breached the government's stay-at-home rules after new powers came into force on Thursday. Officers are also trying to discourage people from going out in their cars to picturesque locations to exercise. Here's our home editor, Mark Easton.
These police recruits in Surrey are being trained to fight crime in a pandemic. Note the gloves.
Afternoon team, welcome back.
Inside headquarters, the chief constable is joined by a military planner as agencies consider how to use new far-reaching powers to keep the public at home.
Some colleagues are having to take steps to really explain to people that treating this as a bit of a holiday is not what this is about.
Footage has emerged of officers in Perth confronting a man who claimed to have tested positive for the virus.
You need to go home and self-isolate and not come outside. If I see you outside once more, you're getting in jail. Go home!
Although this individual did eventually comply, other forces have already used new health protection regulations, issuing a number of £60 fines to people who refuse to go home when ordered. In South Wales, police and a local council are planning to use a drone to encourage people to comply with public health rules.
Please follow the government rules at this time.
After controversy over whether Derbyshire police were right to shame people who drove to the Peak District to exercise, the government today issued new guidance saying people should only use open spaces near their home. In Cumbria, visitors are being told they're not welcome this weekend. Police chiefs are demanding what they call common sense, adding this is a national emergency, not a national holiday.
Scientists at Imperial College London say that around the world as many as 40 million lives would have been lost to coronavirus without the global response. But there's a warning that the poorest countries are still likely to be hit hardest. Our science editor, David Shookman, reports.
All over the world, very different reactions to the virus. In Africa, Rwanda was the first to lock down, while in Senegal, the streets are still busy. And now new research points to a catastrophe unless there's an immediate global response. What this latest study shows is that if literally nothing is done to stop the virus, as many as 40 million people could die from it worldwide this year. Now that isn't likely to happen because so many governments are introducing public health measures. And if they all do, the death toll should fall to 9.3 million. Still horrific, of course. The key to this is timing. If those measures are adopted rapidly, the number dying could fall to 1.3 million. It just shows the critical importance of governments acting urgently. In Bangladesh, a refugee camp for Rohingya people, overcrowded and fearful. It's the poorest who'll be hit hardest, according to the scientists studying the pandemic. In India, there's meant to be a national lockdown. But it's hard to manage. And as in many developing countries, the healthcare system is fragile. Many countries are now doing what they can, but to defeat the virus, it'll take action on a global scale.
Food manufacturers have been cranking up production to meet the increased demand. At the Kingsmill Bakery here in the UK, an additional 2 million loaves a week are being delivered to every UK postcode. And Allison's flour mill is now producing an extra 400,000 bags of flour a week.
It's one of the basic products, flour, and it's in big demand. We weren't allowed in to protect the workers, so they filmed themselves on the food front line.
Our high-speed packing lines are running 24 hours a day.
Everyone's digging in, helping out and seeing what we can do to get that food out to the customers.
Those customers have been panic buying, as well as cooking and baking stuck at home. Some workers have even postponed retirement. In these difficult times, it's about keeping the lorries loaded, from the mill to the meal. The whole food industry is in overdrive, ensuring communities are fed.